Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear. Today, we're talking about this cheddar cheese colored darling, the Dave Smith Instruments Mopho keyboard. It is the knob-laden 32-key version of the Mopho desktop with the same sound engine as that module, 2 DCOs that each have a sub-oscillator, 3 envelopes, 4 LFOs, 4 sequencer lanes, an arpeggiator, and a sequencer. It was released alongside the 4-voice Tetras and the 8-voice Prophet 8, released in the year 2008. Good one, Dave. Which was a weird time for synths and pretty early for the whole analog renaissance that we are definitely living through now. Moog had done the Little Fatty in 2006, I believe, and Dave Smith had the Mono Evolver, I think that was 2006 as well, which has 2 analog oscillators. So it was happening. It was starting to happen. But the market for analog synths really didn't look anything like it does today. Okay, and putting out an analog synth, especially one like this, with a bunch of sick features in 2008 was a really bold, exciting move. I do like this a lot, but there are some quirks. It is certainly not perfect. But between the pedigree of right here on the fucking front panel, Dave Smith Instruments, and the insane amount of synthesis options available to you, it is a smart, compact form factor, deliciously cheesy paint job. I can't believe I don't see these everywhere. I can't believe people aren't talking about these anymore. And I think there's a few reasons, and I'll get to that later. But I'm going to format this like all of my overviews. We're going to go through some of the presets, show you what the manufacturer wanted to demonstrate about this keyboard, and I'll stop and chat about the ones that feel particularly good to me or highlight a feature that I want to call attention to. Then we'll go over what it's like to program, and I'll use my lovely, can you see that? Oscilloscope view to step through the oscillators and the filter and everything else. I'll mention the sound options that make it unique, my impressions of the sound design workflow as a whole, okay? And then I'll wrap up with what these look like on the used market, compare it to the other Mopho models, alternatives from other companies, and I'll make some pretty general recommendations as to buying or not buying. Does that sound good? Cool. If you are subscribed, thanks so much. I watched it tick over 5,000 people the other day, and I'm extremely grateful for that. I am working on something special to mark the occasion, because I still truly, honestly, cannot believe it. If you aren't, which is pretty likely, I appreciate you stopping by. I encourage you to peek around the channel a little bit, see if there's anything else for you. If you like what you see, appreciate my approach, my attitude, whatever. Make sure to subscribe before we're out if you're okay. That stupid pitch is over. Let us talk about gear. So the very first patch, I reloaded the factory patches the other day just to make sure I had them all. And there were a few that I thought were factory but were not. But the very first patch they give you huge monophonic stuff, right? Which is what you expect from something with the lineage of the Pro 1. Big, bold, monophonic sounds, right? And it's like that for a while, but already we're at these sequences. And they're cool to show off, and they sound good, and they demonstrate what you can do with the sequencer and all that, but who's using this? Who's loading this up? Maybe you'll build a track around that because you like it, or you'll tweak it a little bit. Okay, so the way you get to what the sequence, so there's 4 sequencer lanes, okay? You've got a bunch of steps in each of those 4 lanes, and they can all go to a different destination. And so sequencer 1 is going to resonance, 2 is going to envelope 3 amount, audio mod, oscillator 2 frequency. So envelope 3 amount, that doesn't tell me what it's actually controlling. If I want to, on the panel here, find out what it's controlling, so it's not in modulators, which is what my brain would say first, right? Because we're not using it as any of our sources. We're just using these first 2, filter envelope 1 and sequence 3, which goes, if we go back to our sequencer lanes, we've complicated things a little bit. So your sequencer can have a destination in its own part of the menu here when you're in the sequencer setting. Or if you're in modulators, I need to go to source, and I need to click back and forth to find out what it's on. now sequencer 3 can be somewhere else, okay? So already trying to unravel these presets gets kind of complicated because now I have to look in 3 places to find out what sequence 3 is controlling, because it might be in sequencers. My brain wants it to be in modulators, but it's not. And then you think, okay, well, maybe it's in miscellaneous. It isn't. It's up here in miscellaneous parameters. And you scroll all the way down to envelope 3, destination, oscillator 2, pitch, okay? And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, okay? But here we are on triangular and also on screen. 4 seconds at a time, you're going to see the sound editor, the desktop editor, and you can see the sequencer rows way, way easier to understand what it is you're hearing. Okay, and so none of the sequencer lanes are necessarily for pitch, but they can be. So to run the sequencer, this button up here has to be lit, because if it's not, they won't be. But just think of them as you can think of them as stepped, complicated LFOs. If you look at these 4 lanes, not until sequencer 4 are we on one that's controlling the pitch of any oscillator. And it's just oscillator 2. It's not even both. It's not even 1. Okay, and I'm showing you this now because I just want to highlight while we're going through all these sequences, it's not easy at all to move backwards from a complicated sequence just on the unit. It is very helpful if you have the desktop editor open. Cool? Here's an example of one that does not use the sequencer for pitches at all. There's so many of these, it's hard to ignore the fact that I can't ignore how horrible a lot of these sequences are. I get what they're trying to show you, but you don't need them scattered throughout every bank. And this goes to, there's an very old Nick Batt review of this, probably from 2008, where he says a lot of the patches remind him of polyphonic synth presets that are stuck with one voice. And I thought he was just saying that because these have a polychain feature with the Tetras and the Prophet 8 in the Mopho desktop. You can polychain these together and they work really well and they're all patch compatible. And I thought he was just saying that because he knew that he could have a 4-voice one or a 5-voice one if he was polychaining with other hardware. But he's right. That, I want to play a chord with that. I want to play that polyphonically. Even just the way notes are getting cut off like that is really not satisfying to me. And it feels like that was a Prophet 8 patch that they just threw on here, when all the stuff that specifically got put on here is those horrible sequences. Again, what is that about? See, this one, though. I want every preset to be like that. Big, bold, monophonic sounds. I don't want any of these. This is the fucking worst one. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about sequences anymore. I think they're really goofy on here. Again, easy, simple, monophonic sounds. Let them all be that. Do I dare even click on Cheese Intro? Okay, this one's cool. Great use of the sequencer. Great. Get Jazzophone out of here. Give me more of that one. I can't even get through them. What about the later banks? Let's click through. Feels like it should be polyphonic. is a wacky sequence. Fine. Should be polyphonic. Silly sequence. I feel like I'm complaining a lot, but these don't feel like they're doing a great job of explaining and showing and demonstrating what this synth can do. How many times can I understand that the sequencer can do a bunch? You know what I'm saying? How many times can they show me that the sequencer can do wacky shit? It's like 1 out of 3 patches. I don't understand that. Now, what's frustrating and so frustrating about this, it sounds really, really, really good, and it's got great, great options. There's your Devo button. Okay, I'm gonna stop going through those, and I'm gonna click all the way to the beginning, just to remind you of where we started and what a lot of the patches could have been like. And maybe that's just the way I think about using a monophonic synth, and a lot of people aren't working like that. I feel like I'm just being negative, so I'm going to move on from those. If I go to basic patch, right? Okay. We are now in an initialized patch. We're really going to get some use out of the oscilloscope. We are at an initialized patch. And I'm going to start by changing my envelopes a little bit. Let's start with our oscillators. You have two. They're exactly the same. They each have a sub-oscillator, which we'll bring in later. But our available shapes are a sawtooth, a triangle, which I really like. Got a little bit of edge to it. And those together, a shark tooth in some circles. See, again, I need to change something right away. I'm not used to having low note priority on my keyboard. I'm used to having last note priority. And it's frustrating to get there on the miscellaneous parameters because these potentiometers will double trigger when they're notched. Like they click a definitive, like there's a definitive click when you move from one to the next. And sometimes in the middle of them, you'll get an extra, how far did I go? You'll get an extra click or two. See, just then, I went like 4 to the left out of nowhere. I don't know if that's because this is old or needs to be cleaned, but other people have said that about the Mopho. Shark tooth does sound good. Here's our square wave. Pulse width goes from 0 to 0, which I love. This is the voice of mid-editing Jorb. I can't believe I didn't mention it while I was recording, but you see it on the oscilloscope here and in a few other places. The Mopho has this sort of manufacturing or a design flaw, and the control voltage that goes to the pulse width isn't totally clean. I'll link to an old Mod Wiggler thread where they talk about fixing that. Mine has not had that fixed. I just don't know why I didn't mention it. It normally isn't that much of a problem, but it shows up very clearly when I do the pulse width here. And again, can't believe I didn't mention it because I was really fucking frustrated by those presets. Anyway, here goes the rest of the video. Okay. You're quite close to 0 at least. Leave it back in the middle. You can turn it completely off. And as here on our mix, just barely hear some bleed from the other one. Not a huge deal, but we'll go beyond it. I like having individual volumes for each oscillator, but a mix is fine and is quicker in many applications. So back on our first oscillator here. It does this annoying thing for me on things like the sequential 6-track. Pulse width is available on any shape. And here I was like, oh, pulse width is available right next to all these, right? But when you change the pulse width knob while you have any other wave shape selected other than the square, it just jumps to the square. which is frustrating. And to get through the oscillators, you click this button over here, and you can control them both at once. Cool. Okay. And here's what's a little confusing about the way the display works. What's on top is what was saved previously, or what was on the patch when you started, or what's still in the patch memory. And what's on the bottom is what it's currently set to now. So if I go to right and yes, and then click back here, and then I change my frequency, which again, this is notched. This is not a smooth pot. This is a notched encoder. Now the top is telling me the same thing because I saved the patch again. So that can be a little confusing, but again, that's you kind of learn that once and then you move on. It is a nice feature to have. On one oscillator with a sawtooth, let's listen to the filter. That is 4-pole. Make sure these are down. This is 2-pole. Listen to the difference again. 4, 2. High end sticks around a little longer. Let's add a little bit of resonance. Stay 4-pole. And a little more resonance. And a little more. And too much. I think the filter sounds amazing. Great. I think the filter sounds really good. Let's do some resonance with 2-pole. And more. And more. And too much. I don't think it's self-resonating on 2-pole. Yep, that's max resonance on 2-pole. Which sounds good and is not overbearing, but max resonance on 4-pole. I won't even go any further up. It's ear splitting. Okay, I think that's wonderful. We're going to move all the way over here to the envelopes, and this is where I start to get a little complainy. So just like the oscillators, you click through, you control the filter, the amp, the mod or auxiliary envelope, or all of them at once. Okay, and I like to start my shape with all of them at once. But even there, I don't know if I hit a mount or I moved it while I was on all three. But I don't know about you guys, but I rarely change the amp envelope amount. It certainly isn't something that I want to get to and tweak all the time, but the filter amount is constantly. So I really wish that the filter envelope amount was where audio mod was, and maybe audio mod was one of the shift functions or something like that, and I had to go into miscellaneous mod to change the amp envelope amount, whatever. And with the auxiliary envelope, you're in here the miscellaneous parameters already to give it a destination. Why can't I give it a mount right below that? Maybe I'm being a little nitpicky, but I run into constantly. I want to change just the filter amount. And instead of just being able to turn a knob, I have to 1, 2, 3, click, and then change it, and then go back to amp to tweak the decay or whatever else it was I was working on. And I totally respect the conversation of don't ask a synth to do something, come to it and ask what it has to offer. And what this has to offer is incredibly deep sound design, but the price you pay for that is time and ease of access and how immediate it is to go between a few different parameters. Cool, okay. These are 5-stage envelopes, actually. We have attack, decay, sustain, release, but our first shift function, if you hold shift, and then I don't know if you can see it here, but above attack is delay. So let's do that, and that's delay before the whole phase starts. So here we are with no delay. Let's turn some up, which is cool to have. You also have your velocity sensitivity on a shift function while we're talking about it, which is, again, totally minor complaint. This is only positive modulation. It's unipolar, but the amount knob normally is bipolar, positive or negative. But when you're using the shift function, it's only positive. So here I'm at sort of a medium value, but if I change that and I'm in around the same place, now it's negative. Minor complaint, again, but that kind of adds up, and you'll, and again, not to get ahead of myself, but that kind of adds up. There's a lot of minor complaints that I have about this and the way I work with keyboards, the way I'm used to working with synthesizers. Ends up kind of not working for me in the Mopho. Before I forget, here's the sub oscillator. It is a square. And if we have two oscillators on at once, we have a shift function here for fine tune. Okay, and let's talk about our mixer while we're here. Left is oscillator 1, right is oscillator 2. Leave it just on oscillator 1. We have feedback or an external volume control. There's an audio jack on the back. You can run other signals through here, which we love to see. But when nothing's plugged in, it routes the output to the input. You can see it overblowing my you can see it overblowing my oscilloscope down here. Awesome. A very Moog thing. I didn't talk about noise earlier. There's your noise. Okay, there's all that with the mixer. Let's move to the incredibly complicated modulation section. So you pick which of these four things you're controlling. LFOs, sequencer lanes, modulators, which is like rows in a modulation matrix, or miscellaneous mods, and there's more than four, but you can click through them here. And there's sort of performance controllers, expression that you can route wherever without taking up one of your mod slots. It's complicated because they're in different places, but they do essentially the same thing. So let's go back up to our LFOs, and we click through LFOs 1 through 4 here, and then LFOs get their special grouping up here, okay, where you can change their shape between a sawtooth, between a triangle, a sawtooth, a ramp, a square, and then sample and hold, or random. And we can see these flashing lights. I hope those come up well. Are the speeds of each one. So I'm going to turn 1 down and 3 up and 4 way down. So now we look at these lights, which I need to lean my head away from the microphone to see. You can see them changing independently. And sometimes that light will bleed from one to the next. Makes it hard to tell if they're the same or not. But in general, I like that feature. I like the idea of it. It's easy to sync it to the clock. It's easy to sync it to your key press. Your source changes nothing when you're on the LFOs. Your destination will change where they go. So let's go do oscillator all frequency. And then turn up. For oscillator 4. Excuse me, for LFO 4. They go all the way up in audio ranges. This is stepped as well. Okay, that is the triangle, of course. I'm going to turn the amount down. And then there's our sawtooth and our ramp and our square and our sample and hold or our random. I'll go back to triangle, turn the amount all the way down to 0. Okay, that is easy, and all the LFOs work the same. The sequencer lanes, which I touched on a little bit earlier, work just like work really like complicated LFOs. And I'm going to turn on my screen recording again. Okay, you choose your step. The yellow labels up here with this first knob, and the destination changes with the second knob, and the amount goes up here. So let's go C, D, E, oops, that's not what I wanted, F. I turn on the sequencer, and it resets with a key press. And then I'm going to slide over to the desktop editor and change these myself. And you need to hit send. So it'll automatically get sent from the hardware to the software, but it will not do the reverse. Okay, I shouldn't be doing that willy-nilly. I should be paying attention to what I'm doing. I do that, and I do that in that way to show you, if you're comfortable using the desktop editor, this won't be a pain in the ass. If you aren't, or you don't work with a computer, it's a huge pain in the ass. Okay, to use those sequencer lanes for really anything. And if you change their destination to, let's say, envelope amounts, then you go to your steps. It's not pitches anymore. It's just a value between 1 to 127. Sorry, 1 to 125, and then rest and reset. Cool. Reset lets them have different lengths from each other, so you can have them polyrhythmic or out of phase, and rest means you skip that for that lane, okay? The modulators are just mod matrix rows, and so you could use any of these sources. They can be the sequencers, the LFOs, the envelopes, things that are already used in modulation, or things like the mod wheel, which we haven't come across yet. And we can set that to our LFO that we plugged in earlier, if I can fucking find it. LFO 4 amount. Love it. And I feel like my envelope amount is too high again. Okay, so our modulators are like our mod matrix rows, and I'm going to set this amount to 0, and not anything negative, because I'm going to show you in miscellaneous mod. Look at our first one, the mod wheel, and we can click through foot controller, pressure, breath, velocity. So there's 5 of them, so you can't use these lights. But let's get back to mod wheel, and just right here, we can set the destination just like we can a modulation row to be, if I can fucking find the LFOs again, LFO 4 amount. Yay. There you go. So miscellaneous mod can do the same thing as your modulators, and they're grouped up differently because I'm not really sure. They needed a 4th LED here to even everything out. Miscellaneous mod, it's quicker for you to think of it as these are the performance controls that would already want to be assigned somewhere. That brings in complication with this miscellaneous parameters, which you can think of it as one of a few ways, okay? This can be a quicker way to get to things you would normally menu dive for, or this is a place to put things you want physical control for that don't fit into any of the other categories you've already broken out. Because the reality of product design and designing a product, you do not have unlimited space. And because you don't have unlimited space, you're making some compromises. And would it be better to have a knob to assign things like, I don't know, a button for oscillator keyboard tracking, or oscillator sync, or pulse width range? Here we go. Or your envelope destination, or your envelope looping for your auxiliary envelope. Yeah, absolutely. But it's better than having it behind hold program and scroll through everything. Even though here you're scrolling through things as varied as the name of the patch and your envelope 3 destination and your key trigger mode and what the fucking push it button does, which I haven't even talked about. It starts your sequence if you have it set to latch and a note, but it's also just like assigned to a key, and it to me feels like something that was on the desktop unit that just like they continued over for no reason. I don't know. It's weird. I'm not sure. It almost feels like a testing element even. Anyway, I'm not going to harp. I'm going to talk about it because it's useless. But you set that up in here. I'm rambling and just complaining again. These miscellaneous parameters have no commonality, and that makes it hard to remember what is in here. Yes, they're written on the panel, and they're probably written on the panel because who would know to change things as varied as, oh, the name of the patch is in here, which I don't understand why, when that's the perfect candidate for being in this like program settings. Anyway, I don't want to complain anymore. Let me do a quick scan. I haven't mentioned the arpeggiator, which it has another small complaint, but does what you want. But when it's on latch, it doesn't relatch when you press a new group of notes. It adds them. That isn't a setting. That isn't a setting, but it is something they changed in the Mopho SE and the Mopho X4. So it's clearly something they realized was not the right design decision. Anyway, I digress. I feel like all I've done is complain about this when I do actually really like the way it sounds. Okay, I complained a lot, and I don't want to do that anymore. To praise this, you have tons and tons and tons of options, and they are accessible from the panel, even if it can take some time. So if you are someone who's comfortable sitting down for a long time to design a good patch, and then have this with you when you perform live, and you require complicated patches, this is dope. It can do a great job of that. Or if you're somebody who has a computer next to you all the time, and you're comfortable pulling up the desktop editor to make your patches, it's really not bad at all. It is, even if it's a little dated and sizing it is like not easy for some reason, but it's a much better way to see where everything's routed, to make adjustments, change your patches and things like that. And from that perspective, you want to treat it like a VST that you have a hardware interface for, great, you know? And if you're doing most of your editing on the computer, but there's only certain things where you turn to the panel and change the cutoff knob or whatever, then good for you. What a great workflow. For me, I do not work with a computer nearby, if hardly ever, and when I sit down to design a patch, there's a lot of meandering. I don't have much in mind, so it's hard for me to use this panel. And I'm trying not to think of the base station 2, and I had a video kind of a while ago talking about how different the interfaces are, and I come to a lot of the same conclusions, but the base station, other than being cheaper, is easier to sit down and make a sound. It's faster to sit down and make a sound, even if you don't have as many options, because really the modulation options you have on this are insane, and you won't run out. And if anything, just having modulation matrix rows is good, but I find that for a mono synth, I'm not asking that of it very often. I don't want big, complex, evolving things or complicated sequences or stupid, cheesy sequences. I want sort of classic analog synth mono sounds, and maybe I want some complex modulation with the mod wheel, and so I would like to have a modulation matrix, but at the cost of the workflow inconveniences of this and just how much it slows me down, it does not really work for me. Okay, so all that said and done, I feel like I just complained this whole time. I don't like that, but that is my impression with the Mopho. I want to like it. I think it sounds good, but it isn't fun or quick or easy to use. On the used market right now, these are on Reverb for about $500 or $600. That's kind of a lot if you ask me, but just like I described, there are a lot of use cases where it can be a really, really good option. I think I paid $400 or $450. I'll find the actual number and put it up. I think $600 is kind of a lot to ask for this, but if we look at the Mopho X4, which is the same voice architecture with 4 voices, you're looking at $600, $700, $800. And if we look at the Mopho desktop, which is the exact same sound generation as this, I see between 3, 4, and a little bit higher than that, which to me is probably the right route. I like the way this looks. The form factor is amazing. The wood sides are super cool. I love the yellow. But I think that even if you do have more control here, it's not enough to overcome how uncomfortable it is to program. And that might just be me talking from the perspective of somebody in 2021, this renaissance of hardware and analog synthesizers, where 2008, these ideas and these materials and this customer feedback wasn't available. And I'm looking back too harshly on it. But at the same time, if you're buying it in 2021, it's competing with synths that are available in 2021. So who should be buying this in 2021 over things like the Bass Station or the Monologue or like the Sub 25 is not that different in price. It needs to be somebody who requires incredibly deep sound design and a lot of modulation options, and somebody who's comfortable using a desktop editor, and somebody who sees value in having the keys and some physical control over the desktop version. I would recommend the desktop version to most people, again, if you're comfortable with the desktop editor. But this doesn't work for me and the way I like to sit down and interact with synths, okay? I don't know if today's just a bad day for me. Today might have been a bad day for me to sit down and record this. I feel like I just complained the whole time, and that's really not how I feel about this. I do quite like it. But I think it's kind of a hard sell in this year. How about that? That's how I'll wrap this up. I like this a lot. It's got a lot of little problems. I think it's kind of a hard sell in 2021 when there's so many other things available for that, if not a slightly lower price, okay? So I will be passing it on, and I'm doing this video, and I'm making this video now so I can sell it and move on. Here you go. I'm going to play whatever this sequence is. If it sounds like shit, it sounds like shit. My name's Jorb. I love gear. Despite what you might have just listened to, that does include the Mopho. Thanks for watching. This is going to be tough to edit. My name's Jorb. I love gear.